This week's portion, continuing one of my favorite images, is the image of the ladder and then Yaakov Avinu going to sleep. So first I want to focus on the ladder. And then after we focus a little bit on the ladder, the angels going up and down, then I really want to focus not on the ladder, but the image of the angels going up and down. It says that Jacob had a dream, Vayachalom, he had a dream, V'hinei sulam mutzav arza, and behold, in this dream, there was a ladder that was on the ground, firmly entrenched on the ground. Its head was up towards heaven. It's a powerful image to me of a ladder firmly entrenched, that our dreams have to be firmly rooted on the ground, but our heads have to be going towards heaven. And behold, the angels of God were going up and going down on the ladder. This is, Rashi is already going to be wondering, why are the angels going up and then going down? If the angels are in heaven, the presumed manner is that the angels are in heaven, so they'd be going down and only afterwards going up. So why does it say they're going up first and then going down? That's what's bothering Rashi. So well, Rashi says, Olim Techila, that first they went up and only afterwards did they go down. So what does that mean? Rashi says that there were angels who were escorting him in the land. They did not go outside the land of Israel. So they went up to heaven. The angels of the land of Israel first had to leave him. They went up to heaven, and then the angels for outside the land of Israel went down to escort him. That's how Rashi understands it. So that's the idea that Rashi says, that what's the reason why the angels first went up? Those were the angels of heaven. And then the angels went down. Those were the angels of Hutzalar. Those were the angels that were outside the land of Israel. The Hasidic commentaries have a couple of powerful comments on this Rashi. First of all, is from Vayetzei Morgenstern of Lamaz. He says, and first let me pause and say thank you to Janet for sponsoring our Torah study today. Big thank you to you, Janet. Yasher koach. Appreciate it. So we're talking about the angels. Very powerful image to me is the angels were going up and down in Jacob's dream. And Rashi explains, why did the angels go up and then go down? Rashi says it's because the angels from the land of Israel first had to leave, and then he was escorted by the angels outside the land of Israel. The angels for outside that. It's not the same angels. The angels in Israel are for Israel, and the angels outside the land of Israel are for outside the land of Israel. I guess I used to think that the angels outside of the land of Israel had an easier job, or had a harder job, with all the anti-Semitism. But now I think that the angels in the land of Israel have a harder job to protect everybody in Israel. So Vayetzei Morgenstern explains that actually, the reason why the angels were going up first is because in the place where Jacob was, where was Jacob when he had this dream? So according to Rashi, according to the Gemara, he was on Mount Moriah, where the temple was built. Well, anyway, the idea is where Jacob was, that's where the divine presence was resting. And so therefore, the angels were going up, means they were going up to God. That's where Yaakov was. Where Yaakov was sleeping was where the angels were resting. And so therefore, that's what it means. Wherever Yaakov Avinu was, he was communing with God. And so the angels had to go up to get there. This is what it means when it says that God is not in heaven. God was with Yaakov. And so the angels had to go up to get to Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov was with Hashem. So there was nothing left in heaven, because everybody was with God, where God was, and God was with Yaakov. So that's the idea, that the angels aren't necessarily in heaven. Wherever we are communing with God, that's where the angels will come. That's the first idea. Then I saw another idea that about this Rashi that it states, it says, "Behold, v'nei malchei elokim olim v'yordimbo." The angels were going up and down the ladder, and then it says in the next verse, "V'nei Hashem nitzav alav." God was standing over him. God was standing over him. So what does this mean? So we have to note that it says the name of God changes. First, it says Malchei Elokim, the angels of God. That's usually the God associated with justice. And then it says Hashem was standing over him. Hashem is usually the God associated with mercy. So what's going on here? So we could say that at the beginning, the God of justice, the attribute of justice was reigning, the angels of God. And so it has to work like this. First, we go up. A person first has to work on themselves to go up. And after a person works on themselves to go up, then, so to speak, the ladder comes down from heaven. The holiness descends towards man, connects to him. And after you have the awakening of the above and the connection, the attempt, after you have first have the effort to ascend, and then you have the connection with the ascent, and then God sends down the ladder, then we can arouse the God of mercy. Meaning to say, after we work, God starts off our relationship as the God of justice. But when we work on ourselves, on our efforts to ascend, then we have the God of mercy. Okay, so then the next verse I wanted to focus on, I wanted to cite here also in this context, is the Gemara in Chulin states, what was the width of this ladder that the angels were going up? 8,000 parsangs, which is very wide. As it says, the angels of God were going up and going down. Olim means two, and Yordim means two, so it's plural. So therefore, and they banged into each other. So there were two angels going up, two angels going down, and they banged into each other, so that's four. So therefore, you have, and it says about the angel, Ugvioto Tarshish, his body was like Tarshish. And we have an idea that Tarshish was 2,000 parsangs. So the ladder was 8,000 parsangs wide. It's an enormous ladder, So that's how wide this ladder was. What were the angels doing when they were going up? And why were they going down? So the Gemara in Chulin tells us that they were going up to look at the image of God. And they were going down and looking at the images below. So they were going up to stare, and then they were coming down. And what were they doing when they were going up? They were looking at the image of God. What's this image? So Rashi tells us, not Rashi here, but Rashi in Ezekiel tells us that the image of man that was on the four beasts that were on God's chariot. And when they went below, what were they looking at? They were looking at the face of Jacob. And that's a very deep idea. So these angels were looking at the face of God, and then they would go down and look at the face of Jacob. Okay, so then the next verse I wanted to focus on, hold on, is that Jacob went to sleep. He had this vision, he had this dream, and then it says in verse 16, Vayikat Yaakov Mishnato, Jacob wakes up from his slumber, and he says, Jacob wakes up from his slumber and he says, God is in this place, and I did not know, because Rashi says, why does it say he did not know? That if I had known, I would never have slept in this place. Jacob wakes up and he says, oh, God is here. I did not know. If he had known, he never would have slept. So what's the significance of this phrase? It's a very powerful phrase to me. Very powerful phrase, both parts. He says, God is in this place, and I did not know. And if I had known, I never would have slept. So Rav Yitzchak of Vorka says the following. He says, what does it mean that Yaakov woke up? The Midrash says he woke up from his Torah study. So Yaakov woke up from his sleep, and what does he say? I'm with God. Right away he says, I'm with God. He wakes up from his sleep, and right away he says, I'm with God. It says Rabbi Yitzchak of Vorka, when the tailor or the shoemaker goes to sleep, then they're not a tailor and they're not a shoemaker. When they're sleeping, they just are. They're nothing when they sleep. Because when a person is sleeping, he's not doing his work. And so he's not a tailor or a shoemaker, he's just sleeping. But when they say the Rebbe is sleeping, then that's correct. Because when the pious person, when they're sleeping, they're still pious. Jacob, when he's sleeping, his dreams are about God. And so Rabbi Yitzchak of Vorka says, what is the first diff of the Shulchan Aruch? The very first teaching in the code of Jewish law is that a person is supposed to wake up like a lion to serve our Creator. Iskaber Kari. The very first thing our code of law teaches us, a person is supposed to wake up like a lion in the morning to serve our Creator. And Rav Moshe Isserles, in his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch, adds, and when a person goes to sleep, he's supposed to know before whom he sleeps. So everybody asks, what is the Ramah adding? Well, meaning to say, we're talking about waking up in the morning. So why is he talking about what you're supposed to think before you go to sleep? So Rabbi Yitzchak of Vorka says, how do you wake up in the morning like a lion? How do you have the energy and the strength to wake up in the morning like a lion? So it's only if when you go to sleep, you have to know, if you go to sleep like a Jew, like a Yid, then you'll wake up like a Yid. You go to sleep when you have God on your mind, your dreams are of God, your dream of powerful potential ways of serving Hashem. Then when you wake up, you'll wake up with this mission, this service to serve God like a lion. Every time that if you're ever lying in bed and you're saying, how do I get up out of bed this morning? You have to say, I have to serve Hashem. And then you'll get right out of bed. You have to jump up to serve Hashem. And when you jump up to serve Hashem, you'll get right out of bed. Another idea here. So it says in the Midrash, what does it mean that Jacob woke up from his slumber? What does that mean that Yaakov Avinu woke up from his slumber? So the Midrash says, don't read it Mishenato, Veikatz Yaakov Mishnato. Don't read it from his slumber, but read it Mishnaso, from his studies. That Yaakov Avinu, prior to this, had spent 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever. And when he was in that yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever for 14 years, he never slept. He never slept. And so, but what's the meaning? How do we connect that to the phrase? He says, God is in this place and I did not know. So Rashi said, if I was in this place, I never would have slept. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that he woke up not from his sleep, but from his studies, you have to say that basically, let me just summarize it. Rabbi Yochanan says, what does it mean he woke up from his slumber? Don't say from his slumber, from his studies, because that's what he was doing for the last 14 years. He was studying Torah in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever. But Rashi's explanation of this says, I woke up from my sleep because if I had known that God was here, I never would have slept. And that means also, so says the Ger Rebbe, it also means if I had, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if I had known God was here, I never would have learned. I never would have been studying Torah. Because what would I have been doing? I would have been speaking to God. So says the Ger Rebbe, even though Torah study is the most important value, there is another value which is even more important than the most important value. And that's speaking to God. And that's what Yaakov Avinu was doing with this dream. He was speaking to God. So that's what the Ger Rebbe says. So there's a beautiful idea here that Jacob wakes up from his slumber and he says, God is in this place and I did not know. What's the first thing he does when he wakes up? He says, God is in this place. And this is what I was saying. The Chemda Genuza says that the nature of a person that when he wakes is to wake up in the morning. But there's a huge difference between a tzaddik and a regular person. A tzaddik, when he wakes up from his sleep, he says, "Oh, I have to immediately get up to serve God. What am I going to do? Am I going to check my phone? Am I going to read the newspaper? No, I have to get up because I have a lot of work to do to serve Hashem. I have a mission to serve God." That's what the tzaddik does. But the regular person wakes up in the morning is like, okay, I got to get about my day, this, that. No, the tzaddik wakes up, he's ready to serve Hashem. We see this in the parish, in the Torah. What does Yaakov Avinu do? He says, Vayikatz Yaakov Mishnato. He jumps up, ready to serve Hashem. Who's the opposite of Yaakov in the Torah? Who's the opposite? The opposite is Paro. What does Paro do? What does Paro do? It says, Vayikatz Paro. Paro woke up, and then he goes back to sleep. Okay, let me quote the pasuk here. I'll quote it exactly. In Parshas Miketz, it says as follows. It says in Parshas Miketz, it says, Vayikatz Paro v'hinei chalom. It says, Vayikatz Paro vayishan. It says, Paro had his dream, and he woke up, and he went back to sleep. Paro goes back to sleep when he wakes up. But the Yid, Yaakov, the tzaddik, he knows he wakes up, time to serve Hashem. So that's what it is. That's the difference. If we want to, we have to ask ourselves in the morning, do we want to be like Yaakov Avinu? Or do we want to be like Paro, chas v'shalom? So that's the answer. You have to be like Yaakov, the Yid. We wake up in the morning. We don't go back to sleep. We jump out of bed to serve Hashem. So the Meimarom has another beautiful explanation. He says as follows: Yaakov saw in his dream that there was a ladder firmly entrenched on the ground, and its head was reaching the heavens, and the angels of God were going up and going down. That's what he saw in his dream. When he wakes up from his dream, he wasn't moved by this at all. He didn't mention this. What did he mention? He didn't mention the ladders are going up, the angels are going up the ladder and going down the ladder. What does he say? He says, God is in this place. He doesn't talk about the angels going up to heaven. All he focuses on is that Hashem Yisparach is in this place below. In this place, God is. In the Holy Land, in the Mount Moriah, the Holy of Holies. That's where God is. That's the house of God and the gate to heaven. And that's where there's no permission for the angels to go into. Only a human being could go in there. Meaning to say, only a man can go into the Kodesh Kodesh or even the temple at a time, not even the angel. So Yaakov Avinu, when he wakes up, he's not focused on getting up to heaven. He's focused on the fact that where he was below was this place of holiness, this place of God. The Ohev Yisrael, Reb Abraham Heschel, not the professor, but the Hasidic Rebbe, who was the ancestor of Rabbi Heschel, he says on this verse, when it says that what we quoted the Rashi says he slept in that place, and Rashi says in Pasuk Yud Aleph, in that place he slept, but he didn't sleep in the previous 14 years that he was in the yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever. That's what Rashi says. It says he slept in that place, but not the previous 14 years that he was in the yeshiva. That's the Ohev Yisrael. When Yaakov saw this place in his dream, and the angels were going up and going down, he said, God is in this place. What's he saying? Says the of Israel. Says also when we sleep, it's possible to be connected to God and to serve Hashem. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that all those years that I was serving in the Yeshiva Shem Ve'aver, I thought I wasn't allowed to sleep. But now I realize also when I sleep, I can serve Hashem. And that's the vort here. That's what he's saying. Okay, so now it says God is in this place, and I did not know. Vanochi lo yadati. So what does it mean God is in this place and I did not know? What is the concept here of I did not know? So a few powerful ideas we see here. Chazal say that what does a person dream about? When a person dreams, they typically dream about things that they were thinking about. However, Yaakov Avinu had no insight at all that this was the gates to heaven. And so therefore he thought it was a true prophecy. Meaning Yaakov had normally, if we have a dream, it's about something that crossed our path during the day. But Yaakov Avinu had nothing whatsoever related to that during the day. He had nothing whatsoever. And so therefore he said, oh, it must be that I was speaking directly with God. That's what it means, I did not know. Another possibility comes from Reb Shimon of Astropoli. He says, Yaakov saw his name engraved onto the chariot, the Merkava, the chariot of God, as it states, Vanochi lo yadati, means to say, I knew. He says, I did not know. Isn't this powerful idea? He says, I knew that on the chariot there was the four faces of the animals, that there was a lion, an eagle. I knew that those were on the chariot, but I didn't know that I was there too, that the Yaakov Avinu was there also, that his face was on the chariot. What does it mean Yaakov Avinu's face was on the chariot of God? Well, how could this even be possible? It must mean that the Jewish people, Yaakov represents the Bnei Yisrael. The Bnei Yisrael are on the chariot. Bnei Yisrael themselves are part of the Am Yisrael, part of the chariot of God. Okay. And it says that Jacob woke up from his sleep and he said, how awesome is this place? This is the house of God and this is the gate of heaven. Okay, I don't want to focus on that because we focused on that during our Rashi study in the afternoon. So I want to go to the verse. Yaakov says, if Hashem will be with me, then and give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, then he takes a vow in chapter 28, verse 20, then I return in peace to my father's home, and then Hashem will be my God. And this stone, which Asher Samti Matseva, this stone which I made as an altar here, will be the house of God. V'kol asher titein li aser asrenu lach. So the Gemara in Ksubos states on this idea something very interesting. Jacob says, what does it mean? What does it mean when he says, everything that you give me, I will give a tenth, whatever you give me, I will give a tenth. But is he really saying I will give a tenth? It's a aser asrenu does not mean a tenth. Let's I just want to just check here to see how they translate in this thing. It doesn't mean a tenth. The Gemara clearly says it's not a tenth. The Gemara says it means something else. And I want to read to you how they translate it. Hold on 1 second. He says, yeah, here they just translate it as a tithe, but they don't say a tenth. But the Gemara in Ksuvos, and we'll stop here in a moment, and I want to take the question. But the Gemara in Ksuvos stuff, Nun Amid Aleph says the following. The Gemara in Ksuvos says, somebody wants to give charity, Al Yivazves Yoser Mechomesh, should not, while they're alive, give away more than 20% of their assets. Because we don't want them to become poor. We're not talking about people today who have certainly enough money that they can give away 98% of their assets and they won't need to ask for charity. We're not talking about Jeff Bezos. We're talking about people, regular Joes, who they're not allowed to give more than 20%. And what's the source? This is the source. This is the verse. I will give a tenth and a tenth, meaning 2/10. So I'm going to give 20%. So we see from here, this is the source, that when a person gives charity, the most they should give is 20% of their assets. Okay, we'll stop, pause. So the Komet Mincha asks, what's the big deal that you take 10%? They understand that they're giving 10%. What's the big deal of Jacob giving 10%? Jacob saying, whatever you give me, I'm going to give 10% to charity. Big deal. He says, what's this such a big deal that you're taking, God gave you $1,000 and you give 100 of it to charity? Big deal. So he says, it as follows. He flips it. It's a beautiful idea. He says as follows, that the portion of a person in all his work, in all his toils, that what's your portion? Only what you give to charity. And so he says, Kol asher titain, everything that you give, from that which you give, is li, belongs to me. Meaning to say, the only thing that belongs to me is what I've given. Only what I've given, so only the tithe, that's the only thing that's mine. Is the expression that when you go, the only thing you could take with you is what you've given. So that's what he's saying. Kol asher titain, everything that you give to charity, li, that's who I am. And that's what he says, that 10th or the 20% that I give to you, that's mine. So now we have a story that in the days of the younger days of the tzaddik or mayor of Parmesan, before he began to be a great Rebbe, he had one cow, one milk cow, and that's what supported him. And so therefore, since he only had one cow, he was as frugal as possible. Why? Because he wanted to be able to have enough money to give poor people enough money so that they could buy meat to enjoy Shabbos. So his whole life, Rav Meir was giving out a lot of money to the poor, whether it's from his own money or from others, that basically they would give him the money and they would say, we want you to give this out for charity. And one time, it was Wednesday, and he didn't even have a single penny to give out. So he had an idea to slaughter his cow, and that way he'll give the meat to the poor. And that's what he did. So basically, just to summarize so far, he had a cow. The only way he made a living was his cow. He was milking. But he used to he'd take all of his money and he would collect money to give it out to poor people so they could have a nice Shabbos dinner with meat. Those days, they felt that was the way to do it. But what happened was that Wednesday he didn't have any money, so he slaughtered the cow and he gave out the meat of the cow. So that night, he took the cow to the shayachet to do the shlita, to do the slaughtering. And immediately afterward, after the shlita, he divided up the meat to the poor. In the morning, his wife, the Rebbitzin, she went to go milk the cow. To her shock, her great astonishment, she couldn't find the cow. she came crying and screaming before her husband, the tzaddik, and she told him, the cow's gone. The tzaddik said, the cow is not gone. We have not lost the cow. The cow has gone up to the heavens. That's a story about the power of tzedakah. That story I believe, actually. Not all these Hasidic stories I believe, but that one I could believe, that the Rebbe said you have to give it away. He's a pure man. He gave it away. Okay, so let me just talk from the Torah Tamima about this idea of not giving more than 20% to charity. And then we'll go into the next verse. So it says, I said the Torah Tamima cited this Gemara from Ksuvos Daf Nun, that this is the source for the idea that you're not allowed to give more than 20% to charity, because aser is 10, asrenu 10. A tithe I will tithe, meaning to say 10 plus 10 equals 20. That's 20%. So the Ravid and the Rashba say this idea that you're not allowed to spend more than 20%, that's to fulfill a positive commandment. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a positive commandment from the Torah to write a Torah scroll. How much is a Torah scroll? Let's just throw out a conservative number. Let's say it's $100,000. So a Torah scroll, let's say you only have $200,000. Clearly, you don't have to spend that money to buy the Torah scroll because it costs more than you could afford. But say the Rav and the Rashba, that's only for a positive commandment. That you're not supposed to spend more than 20%. If you only have $100 and the lulav and esrog costs $50, you shouldn't buy the lulav and esrog. You don't have to. You're spending half of your money. It's too much. So therefore, that's what they say about a positive commandment. But a negative commandment, you have to give up all your money. It means, let's say you're going to lose your job if you don't violate the Shabbos, and then you're going to lose more than 20% of your money. You have to not violate the Shabbos. And so therefore it says in the Shema, B'chol modecha, with all your money. B'chol modecha, with all your might. The Gemara says with all your money. So in order not to violate a negative commandment, you have to give all your money. But we have a point, says the Torah Tamima, because we know that a person, his livelihood is dependent upon his money. So he needs the money in order to live. We saw that in this week's parasha also, that Esav sent his son to kill Yaakov. So rather than kill him, he took away all his money and made him destitute. It was like a form of killing him. So therefore, if a person thinks under certain circumstances, the Torah Tamima says you can not give all your money to violate a negative commandment because it becomes a matter of pikuach nefesh, it becomes a matter of life and death. So that's something you have to bear in mind. That sometimes not violating a negative commandment is not as simple as giving up all your money, because it can become a matter of life and death. Certainly going homeless on the streets of a very cold area or even a dangerous area can be a matter of life. I want to go to another pasuk. The pasuk tells us in chapter 29, we're going to the next chapter. It says, Jacob lifted up his feet, Vayisa Yaakov Ragov, Vayelach Arza B'nei Kedem. And he went towards the B'nei Kedem, the east, towards the land. Vayar, and he sees V'nei Be'er Basadeh. Such a beautiful word. There's a well in the field. I had the ability not to see this well, but I saw the well that Moshe met his wife at in Midian. We saw that in northern Saudi Arabia, this giant well where everybody would come. A well is not just like a small little well in somebody's backyard. It's a giant well which the whole province would come to. And so there was a well in the field, and there were 3 flocks of sheep crouching by the well. From this well, the shepherds would give water to their flock. The large stone was on the mouth of the well. So what's the reason why there was a large stone on the well? The reason why there was a large stone, the reason why there was a large stone is because presumably there wasn't enough water to go around. And so therefore, everybody was concerned that the other one would come and take too much water. So therefore, they put the stone on the well to make sure that if they wanted to get the water from the well, they would all have to go and do it together. But we could take from here a very powerful idea. What does the well symbolize? The well symbolizes Torah study. Torah study is too much. It's too hard for us to do it all on our own. There's like a stumbling block in front of all of us. What's that stumbling block? What's the stone? It's the world. Life is the stone that stops us from studying Torah. How many of us would have taken this hour that we've spent together now and dedicated to Torah study? It's too hard to do on our own. When we come together, we're able to lift each other up, and then the water will be enough to sustain everybody. So there wasn't enough water for everybody when they came on their own. That's why we need this stone there. They all need to remove the stone together. We all need to remove the stone of our life. And that's what it means. There's a well in the field, meaning to say, what's the field? The field is something that's like life. There's a well in the field. What's the well? The well is Torah. But the only way we can access the Torah is when we all lift it up together. We all lift it up together. I just want to say one more pasuk. I don't want to stop, and then I'll take questions. It says there's a lot of beautiful verses in this beautiful verses, but I just want to talk about one. It says that when Yaakov sees Rachel, it says that when he sees her in chapter 29, verse 11, Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel, Jacob sees Rachel coming down. Vayisas kolo vayek. He lifts up his voice and he cries. Why is Yaakov crying? He sees the woman. He's thunderstruck with love. Why is he crying? Why is he crying? Rashi tells us a few reasons why Yaakov is crying. One, he saw with divine prophecy that it wasn't going to last. He was going to bury her, and she wouldn't come with him into the land of Canaan. The greater the love, the greater the loss. He was crying because he knew that he would have to bury her. But he still married her, knowing he was going to have to bury her. Second explanation is he cried because he felt he couldn't adequately give her gifts. Because he was coming there destitute and penniless. Rav Yaakov Moshe Charlap comments on the first answer. And I think it's something we all have to bear in mind. I mean, obviously I think like one of the greatest passions in the world is feeling love. But look how awesome this is, says Rav Yaakov Moshe Charlap. At that moment that Jacob sees Rachel, sees she's the love of his life, the moment of this kiss, Yaakov remembers the day of his death. And the Ruach HaKodesh rests upon him. And he saw what would happen to him and to her. How special was it, that moment of happiness? He was able to put it all in perspective and recognize how fleeting it was, and recognize the day of his death. So that's the power. The power is, even at that moment that he was seeing the way God was blessing him, he was putting it in perspective and realizing that every second was precious, and he was focused on his death. I'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to hear them. Thank you, Janet.